everybody is eager. We worked very hard on this. Everybody recognizes the problem and that it's only going to get worse. Everybody wants a solution to the problem, and I think people would like the president to be able to say, to snap his fingers and finish this out. The fact is, it's more complex than that. We have a system. You have to have a certain number of votes to pass a bill. Putting that together takes time, and he's been working on doing that. His goal and his interest is not in scoring a symbolic, making a symbolic gesture, not putting up votes for the sake of putting up votes, but in actually getting something done, and that's what he's working toward.
Well, but there have been some who've said the only way to get those votes is to strip down what's currently on the table, or even to break it into pieces and move it forward in a more modest fashion.
But that really underscores the point, because there are those who say we should simply exhort the House to pass the Senate bill. Mm-hmm. There are those who say we should break the bill up and go into, as you suggest, to smaller pieces. There are a lot of views, even within the Democratic Party, about how to proceed. Reconciling all those views is a task, and it is not something that you can do by command or by ordinance of the President of the United States. It takes some work, and we're working through it. I'm encouraged by what I see, because as I've said before, so much of what has been proposed is supported not just by Democrats in the House and Senate, but also there are things supported by Republicans. I was interested to hear Governor McDonnell's response to the President's State of the Union address, in which he said, what he needs to do is embrace Republican ideas like allowing insurance companies to sell insurance across state lines. Well, he'll be relieved to know that that's actually in the bill. So maybe that will make him more comfortable. And one of the reasons that we should sit down and really work through our differences on these bills is because I think what people will find is that there are many more areas of commonality than the public understands, and that perhaps they understand, or perhaps that they want to acknowledge.
Let me follow up on a point that Jerry Seid brought up, and that is your meeting with Senator Franken, because the headline in Politico was that Senator Franken lit into you.
Yes, I saw that.
Was that a fair characterization? What happened?
Well, I think we had a very good exchange. As I said, he expressed his feelings about this. I thought responded, very candidly to him, and it was a good airing of views. And at the end of it, as I was watching Senator Franken, I thought to myself, however this turns out, I'm good, I'm smart, doggone it, people like me. So I was okay with it.
You've been practicing that. Let me turn to national security for just a moment. In the new issue of The New Yorker, Jane Mayer has a story about the decision to try the 9/11 co-conspirators, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, in New York. And some unhappiness, she reports, within the White House, especially Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel, about that decision by the Attorney General to do that. Was that a mistake on his part?
No, the Attorney General was responding under the protocol that was developed between the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense for the prosecution of terrorists, and he made the decision on that basis. Rahm has a perspective that's different. He's the Chief of Staff. He looks at things from a legislative perspective. He looks at from other perspectives. The Attorney General was ruling on his view of what the law commanded in that point. But we have, believe me, we have disagreements all the time within the White House, within the administration. That's as it should be. People have various perspectives and various points of view.
Let me ask you also on the same subject of detainees. Part of Senator Scott Brown's election hinged on this idea. He made the case that the United States is now giving new rights to terrorists. Is A, that true, and B, how is that going to affect the 2010 midterms if that's a narrative that takes off?
Well, let's review a little bit of history. There were over 190 accused terrorists tried by the last administration, the Bush administration, in civilian or Article III courts. That includes Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. That includes Moussaoui, the 20th 9/11 bomber. Republicans applauded that during the time. Dick Cheney supported it. Rudy Giuliani said he was in awe of our justice system after Moussaoui was convicted. So the real question is, why the change of attitude just because we had a change of presidents. The reason they were tried there was because it is the most effective, efficient way to bring people to justice. And in terms of investing rights in these prisoners, it was Judge Mukasey, who then became the Attorney General under the Bush administration, who ruled that there were certain rights that even people who were enemy combatants had, rights to a lawyer and various other procedural protections, habeas corpus, and so on. So, no, this isn't new. We haven't invested anybody with one more right than they had before we took office, and we're actually not behaving any differently than the last administration did, which raises the question, is this about politics or is it really about dealing with the issue at hand?
Yeah, speaking of politics, you could make the case that the most interesting and maybe the most important political event of this weekend isn't happening here in Washington at all, but down in Tennessee where the Tea Party movement is having a convention. Raises lots of interesting questions, not the least of which is, what does that whole movement tell us about the political mood of the country? And what do the Democrats do to take advantage of it? There's been a lot of the conversation about how the Republicans want to co-opt the Tea Party movement. What do the Democrats need to do to co-opt the Tea Party?
Well, I think one thing that we ought to recognize is that the Tea Party movement has grown out of a sense of frustration about government here in Washington and politics here in Washington. It's not isolated to Democrats or Republicans. What was interesting to me, for example, about the Brown election in Massachusetts is that people said they were unhappy with the policies of Democrats in Washington, but they were more unhappy with the politics and policies of Republicans in Washington. There is a sense that this town is consumed by politics, that people are consumed by their own ambitions, and that we're not dealing with the real problems facing the country, including, yes, the deficits. The president in this last couple of weeks endorsed the idea of a fiscal commission because he understands that Republicans and Democrats have to join together if we're really going to get a handle on these deficits that have grown up over the last decade. And that bill came up, and as you know, it got 53 votes. It needed 60 because once again it was being filibustered. And it failed because 7 Republicans who had sponsored the bill walked away from their own fiscal commission debt reduction bill. Well, we're not going to get anywhere if that's the kind of politics that we play in this town. I think people who are involved now in the Tea Party movement are expressing their frustration about that. And I think politicians of both parties in this town have to understand that frustration.
There are some who see the Tea Party movement and see it as and call it a conservative movement. Do you think that's what it is?
I don't know how I would characterize it as much. I think it's a movement that has grown up out of protest and frustration about the hyper-partisanship, about the special interest influence, about lack of responsibility that they perceive here in Washington and frankly elsewhere on Wall Street and other places. There is a real sense in this country that everyday people are meeting their responsibilities, but our institutions are not. And I think that's what motivates this movement. It may land harder on us right now because we're the party in power, but understand some of those same forces are what drove people to vote for Barack Obama in 2008, and we are completely faithful to the notion that we have to change the way we do business in this town, and we have to start dealing with the big problems facing this country.
But when the House voted to raise the debt limit 217 to 212, 2/3 of the Democrats who voted against it up for re-election this year, freshman Democrats. So what does that tell you about their mindset moving into the 2010 elections?
Well, it tells me that that was a tough vote. The fact is, we didn't create the, understand when the last Democratic president left office, we had surpluses, a surplus of about $237 billion, I think, projected surpluses for the decade of about over $5 trillion. When we came to office, we had a $1.3 trillion deficit and projected debt for the decade of over $8 trillion. And people are very angry about deficits. They're angry about debt. The debt ceiling is a terribly negative symbol. And so it's a difficult political vote. I understand that. We've had to do a lot of difficult things this year, but we have to do that because it's in the interest of our country. What we also did, however, as part of that, was pass the pay-go legislation, pay as you go, so that the government has to do what every family and business does, which is pay for things rather than putting them on a credit card.
Another 2010 question for you. With many open governor seats in play, 21 open seats, how many are Democrats going to lose? How bad of a hit are you all going to take in 2010 at the governor's level?
I don't know, Ann. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that it's a difficult time to be a governor. It's a difficult time to be a mayor. It's a difficult time to be in any executive position because the economy, we have the worst recession since the Great Depression. That has taken a terrible toll on states and